Let me just give a shout out to Spark Pause. This video is not sponsored by them, but I kind of wish it was. Look, say hi, Hazel. Say hi, Hazel. You say hi. Oh, you have to come more forward. Say hi. Look at her jumper. It matches mine. It matches mine. And we're so cute. Aren't we? You're so cute. Say hello. Say hello. Wait. Hazel. Wait, let's show them how cool we look with our heads up. Gangsta. I'm a gangsta. Hi, and welcome back to my channel. Thank you again so much for being here. And today's topic is going to be one that I've been studying for the past probably over a month, but it's sleep. It's something that I've been very interested in ever since I have been studying about learning how to learn. And I read some articles about sleep and I thought, oh my God, I need to study this in more detail. And now even as I present this to you, I'm like, do I know enough? Like, did I study enough? But I think I know enough because it's something that you can go down a rabbit hole and there's just so much that you can learn about it and in so much detail. So today I'm just going to share with you the basics of sleep. I hope that you enjoy and that you learn something from it and that it can help you. Let's get started. What is sleep? Why do we sleep? And what causes us to sleep when we sleep? Basically, sleep is this period of time in our lives, usually between 7 and 9 hours, which is the hours that is recommended, where we lose consciousness of our external surroundings. Our muscles tend to completely relax and our eyes close. It's a way for your body to completely reset itself. Sleep and wakefulness are actually intrinsically linked in the sense that what you do when you're awake affects how and when you sleep, and how well or how not well you sleep affects how you are during your wakefulness state. So it's important to note that they're not separate from one another. Sleep actually strengthens the neurons and the neural pathways of the new information that you've taken in during the day, which helps strengthen that knowledge overnight. The amount of benefits, and I'll list them throughout the video, is just amazing. Sleep is so amazing, actually. What is it that makes us want to go to sleep at a certain time? Well, there's two things that makes us want to go to sleep at a certain time. Number one is adenosine. That's extremely low when we wake up in the morning, and throughout the day of being awake in a wakeful state, adenosine builds up. Okay, so adenosine is what creates a drive for sleep. So it creates a sleep hunger, we could say. When you go to bed at night, when you feel tired, that's your adrenaline slash adenosine. Oh, no. Take that back. No. So when your adenosine reaches a certain level, that is the feeling of needing to sleep. On a note about adenosine is also caffeine. So I know most of the world are caffeine drinkers, right? Now, caffeine is a psychoactive substance and it's not bad per se. I think it's just the amount you drink and the timing of it. So you want to allow yourself at least 90 minutes after you wake up before you drink caffeine, because you don't want to be still sleepy when you drink caffeine. You want to leave basically a sleep cycle after you wake up before you consume caffeine. What caffeine does is it blocks the adenosine receptors in your brain. As we know, adenosine is the compound that gives you that sleepy feeling. Caffeine blocks those receptors, making you feel more awake. But what happens is, well, imagine that your adenosine receptors are like a car park, okay? And your adenosine receptors are meant to go into those slots, right? But now caffeine has come along and caffeine has gone into those slots. So adenosine doesn't have anywhere to go. It's not going to go into its usual receptors, which means you're not going to feel sleepy because caffeine's in the receptor. But what is happening is your adenosine levels are building up while caffeine is still in the receptor, and it takes a good 5 to 7 hours for caffeine. It's what's known as a half-life for 50% of caffeine to leave your body, which means it will take about 5 to 7 hours for that caffeine to come out of the receptor. During those 5 to 7 hours, your adenosine levels are still building up, but you don't know that because it's not in your receptor in your brain. So when caffeine does finally decide to leave the spot, not only will not only will adenosine go back into the receptor, but you'll have way more adenosine than you did have 5 to 7 hours ago, and you will feel what's called a caffeine crash. Okay, so some people are more sensitive to caffeine than others, and it's up to you to experiment with that, what you can and cannot have, but it's recommended not to have caffeine 8 to 10 hours before you're going to go to sleep. Okay, which means that if you go to bed at, we'll say, 11, you don't want to be having caffeine after 3 p.m. Ideally 1 p.m. Okay, so having it in the afternoon is fine. Genetically, we're all different, so like you might be more sensitive to caffeine than I am, or vice versa. And some people, but only a small subset of people, can actually drink caffeine and then go to sleep. And I believe it's because their adenosine receptors are a little bit mutated, so it doesn't affect them. That is not to say, though, that your sleep will not be affected by that caffeine. So yeah, just because you can sleep doesn't mean that your quality of sleep isn't affected by the caffeine. So I just keep that in mind also. Second thing is our circadian clock. So circa means about, and dien is a derivative from diem, which means day, so about a day, circadian. So we all have a circadian clock, and for us, it's the suprachiasmatic nucleus, which is located just above the roof of your mouth. And this clock, which is inside your brain, it's the main clock within you. So it has access to all the other cells and organs in your body. So this suprachiasmatic nucleus, which is located in the hypothalamus, in the anterior part of the hypothalamus in your brain, and this clock runs by itself. It doesn't need any other external factor. Even if you were in a dark cave for weeks, you'd still have a period of time to sleep and a period of time for wakefulness. And that period of time to sleep would still be 7 to 9 hours. So your circadian clock is not extremely accurate. It runs in about 24 hours and 15 minutes. So what it does is it uses external factors to set itself. And these factors are called Zeitgebers, which is German for time giver. And the main Zeitgeber is light, which is probably one of the best methods to use to reset your circadian clock, considering it's so accurate and so consistent. We have these cells called melanopsin ganglion cells, which are located just at the bottom half of your eyes, and their main purpose is to transfer light information from your eyes to the suprachiasmatic nucleus. Now, these ganglion cells aren't very sensitive when you first wake up, and so the light, it takes a lot of lux, which is a unit of measurement for light. It is basically 1 candlelight, 1 meter from the candle, and 1 square meter lit up. So it takes a lot of lux to spike a cortisol spike, which then in turn results in a melatonin spike 12 to 14 hours later. The melatonin is a hormone which occurs at the onset of sleep. What Andrew Huberman recommends is that when you get up, the very first thing that you should do is go outside and get light exposure so you can set off this cortisol and melatonin cycle as soon as possible. He does recommend going and getting the sun at a low solar angle because the blue and yellowish lights work best for these ganglion cells in your eyes. But if that's not possible, it's not possible. If you're getting up before sunrise, that's absolutely fine. You can use alternative methods like artificial lights. And there's a free app called Light Meter, which you could download to just check how much lux is in certain lights. For example, like the ring light for photos and videos is really high in lux. So if you were getting up at like 4 or 5 and you want to go to bed early and you want to start that cycle off as soon as possible, then it is best that you knock on a light like that, for example, to set that cycle in motion. Just as it's important to get light exposure in the morning, Andrew also says that getting light exposure at sunset is also very important because of the type of light at sunset. It actually triggers a melatonin release as well. So if you happen to miss the morning sunrise, then at least try and get the evening sunset. Ideally, you want to be getting both to really set your circadian clock. And if you can, ideally do it at the exact same times all the time, it will be much better for your whole circadian cycle. Blue light has gotten a really bad rep, I think, and people don't realize that it's not blue light that's bad. Actually, blue light is extremely necessary in the mornings or in the early afternoons for this cortisol melatonin cycle. And so it's best to not wear blue blockers early in the morning, to not wear sunglasses on the way to work in the morning or in the early afternoon. So you want to get as much light exposure as possible into these ganglion cells in your eyes. I'm guilty of this. I used to always wear sunglasses on the way to work. I used to scoot, and had I known this before that, I wouldn't wear sunglasses. I just thought it was good to always protect your eyes from the sun and light exposure, but I was wrong. However, the opposite is also true. If it's like very late in the evening and you are doing work on your computer, that's the time to wear your blue blockers. That's the time to cut out your light, and maybe that is also the time to wear your sunglasses. They see me rolling, they hate it. If you don't want that light exposure, because when you think about it, we're not used to having the access of light at any time of the day. Like, that's so unnatural for us. When we were hunter-gatherers, we were back in our primitive state. We didn't have this access to light. We didn't just flip a switch and have a light on. And so biologically, we're programmed to associate light with day and activity, and darkness with relaxation and sleep time. It's important that we don't get too much light at night when it's time to go to sleep, and similarly that we get lots of light during the morning and early afternoon. At different stages in our lives, our circadian clock is different. So as we develop to the different stages of life, our circadian clock changes. As an infant, as a baby, our circadian rhythms are not fully developed. So there's lots of sleeping periods with frequent waking periods as well at different times throughout the day. So it's pretty inconsistent. Then as we reach the stage of being a child, our circadian clock is set in the way that we go to bed early and we tend to get up early. Then as we move through that phase into adolescence, our circadian clock tends for us to want to go to bed later and get up later. And then as an adult, our circadian clock is slightly earlier than it used to be as an adolescent. And then we typically get up slightly earlier as well as we reach into an elderly phase of life. Circadian clock is almost going back to the way it was when we were a child, where we tend to get up early and go to bed early. It's also important to note that like we have certain genotypes within us. So some people are more morning people and some people are more night owls, and some people are in between. And that's actually part of our genetics. So if you are a night owl, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. I think that our society kind of stigmatizes and makes people feel bad for wanting to stay up late, and it praises people who tend to want to get up early. But actually some people are just in their nature to want to stay up later than others. You can alter your circadian clock and the timings of when you're awake and your sleep by your light exposure. If you want to get up earlier, you could have a timer for your lights and you could set it to go off 45 minutes before you get up, and that way then in time you will tend to just get up naturally earlier because of the light. B, when you do exercise. So if you exercise really early in the morning, it will help you wake up at an earlier time. And if you have set timings for things, like even social interactions can be a sidekeeper if you keep it consistent. Sleep also helps transfer short-term memory to long-term memory for fact-based information. So it takes information and it moves it from the hippocampus, which is the area of your brain that holds only a limited number of pieces of information, and then it moves it to the cortex. So the cortex is your long-term memory storage. If you don't sleep, you still have pieces of information in your hippocampus. That hippocampus can only hold a limited number. So if you're a student and if you didn't get proper sleep and you wake up the next day and you didn't get proper sleep and you're trying to learn more information, you can't possibly learn more information if your hippocampus hasn't gotten rid of some previous information to the cortex. You're not going to be able to take in any more information short term, so it's not going to go into your brain. So if you're studying, it's so important, not just if you're studying, for any aspect of life, it's important to clear that space out to make way for more information. If you want to learn something, really learn something, studying before bed is a really good idea because you're consolidating that information while you sleep. Our brains are amazing. honestly.
So in this way, we can see how sleep helps you to learn and retain the information that you have just learned, and it also helps to consolidate that information.
Also for motor skills, for people who are creative, it helps with your creativity. Sleeping actually, especially REM sleep, it makes connections with things that seem very unlikely, and this way it helps promote creativity. When you wake up, you have better ideas, you're able to solve problems more easily because of REM sleep. And not only that, but motor skills. Our motor skills are improved. So if you are learning a piece on the piano or on the guitar, you're a musician and you're getting stuck somewhere, if you go to sleep and wake up the next day, you'll probably be able to play that piece without that issue. As Matt Walker said, practice does not make perfect, practice with sleep makes perfect. Melatonin is a hormone. It's a hormone that signals the onset of sleep, but I would just be mindful of anyone who has sleep difficulties and takes melatonin as a tablet form. Where I've read this research is probably predominantly based in the United States, so maybe it's not applicable to Ireland or Europe in general. Melatonin is fairly unregulated, which is quite surprising considering it's a hormone. We cannot get any other hormone in a pharmacy. You can't go in and ask for estrogen or testosterone from a pharmacist, but yet we can get melatonin, which is kind of crazy considering they're all hormones. Apparently it's quite unregulated, so it might say there's a certain amount of melatonin in the product and it might actually be false. It might be up to like 4 or 5 times more, or else sometimes 4 or 5 times less. So just be very careful with it. Melatonin also doesn't help with the process of sleep. It doesn't help you stay asleep. It helps you go to sleep. So melatonin is basically like the person at the start of the race that waves the flag. It's the person that tells you it's time to run, it's time to sleep, but doesn't actually participate in the race itself. It might help you get to sleep, but it may not help with your quality of sleep. And yes, it's important to get to sleep, but if you have bad quality sleep, it has really bad adverse health effects for you. If you're not elderly, I think it's not a good idea. Matt Walker talks about elderly people and their pineal gland, which is the only gland where melatonin is released from, not having the ability to release as much melatonin as it used to. And so for elderly people, taking melatonin might be a good thing.
Melatonin has also been known to suppress the onset of puberty. And so for those people in the category of going through puberty, it's definitely not a good idea to take melatonin. Of course, you can speak to your GP or practitioner and get the advice that you need specifically for you, but just make sure that you do your research before taking it. Of course, not everybody's going through puberty, but it also has some negative effect with other hormones in your brain.
But other than in the case of jet lag, it's not necessarily beneficial to take melatonin just because of all of the negative consequences. Speaking of jet lag, our circadian clock is timed to wherever we came from. So if we're going somewhere where the time difference is 8 hours ahead, our circadian clock can only readjust to the new time an hour a day, which means it's going to take you 8 days to get your circadian cycle back to normal, depending on which way you go, whether you fly east or west. If you fly east, apparently it's slightly more difficult because you're catching up on sleep, whereas if you fly west, it's almost like you're staying up later, which is easier for us to do. So tips for sleeping well. So tip 1 is having regularity. So waking up at the same time and going to bed at the same time. Waking up at the same time and going to bed at the same time is apparently more important than the amount of hours you get asleep.
Of course, it's okay if it's like an hour in the difference. So if you're about an hour earlier or an hour later going to bed, or an hour earlier or an hour later getting up, just not to have such a dramatic difference.
Temperature, as I mentioned earlier, so making sure that you're in a cool room. Apparently 18 degrees Celsius is perfect because our bodies drop about 2 to 3 degrees at night. Making sure you get light exposure in the morning to start that cycle, the cortisol melatonin cycle. Making sure you get the sunset light to help encourage the melatonin. Exercising is really important to help make us feel tired. Personally, I think from my own experience, when I was abroad and I was working for a theatre company and we're putting on shows all around the Netherlands, I would go to bed and I would hit the pillow and I would have no problem going to sleep. I realized I'm not doing enough exercise at home. And yeah, perhaps it was a very intense exercise. When you think about what we did as hunter-gatherers, we could have spent hours looking for food. We were used to that. And so we still need to use up energy. We need to make ourselves tired. It's like when we bring the doggies for a walkie. And they're like, mwah! Reducing your light at night
because the melanopsin ganglion cells, those neurons that transmit that light information from your eyes to the suprachiasmatic nucleus, which is the circadian clock, those neurons become more sensitive to light as the day goes on. If you get a lot of light into your eyes at night, then your body will think that it's daytime and it will spike this cortisol spike, which will in turn keep you awake and stop you from sleeping. The most important time of the day not to have light exposure to your eyes is between 11 p.m. and 4 a.m. The reason being is we know that those neurons in your eyes are way more sensitive to light at this time, but then also when light hits the eyes between these hours,
it's signaled to a structure called the habenula, which is located in the thalamus. And when the habenula is activated, it's also known as the disappointment nucleus because it makes you feel disappointed. It's kind of sad, isn't it? There's a disappointment nucleus. It's like, that's crazy. Having lights on low is actually fine because these melanopsin ganglion cells are located at the bottom of your eyes. And because of the lens in our eyes, they're way more sensitive to overhead lights, which makes a lot of sense because of the sun. So having lights on down low, candlelight's absolutely fine, fire's absolutely fine, moonlight's fine, and red light is absolutely fine as well. It doesn't trigger the circadian clock to think it's daytime. So any of those lights are fine. I just recommend making your house really snuggly by having loads of candles at nighttime, or especially before bed. I know not everybody can do this because we have a lot of people who work night shifts, and because of their job or their lifestyle, they cannot do it. And it's unfortunate that it's not possible. And I don't know, I haven't researched the best methods to go about optimally reducing the adverse health effects of late night work. I would look up Andrew Huberman if it's something that you want to look into more, because he's a neuroscientist and he's incredible and he's great at explaining this. And he also does it in detail, and he does office hours for his podcast where you can write in questions and he'll answer them. So if it is a case that you're worried about the amount of light you're getting into your eyes or your sleep, I would definitely have a look at his podcast and see what he says specifically about night workers, because I haven't researched that very well. The repercussions of not getting enough quality or quantity of sleep. So both quantity and quality of sleep are very important. If you get 4 hours of good quality sleep, it's still not enough. If you get 8 hours of bad quality sleep, it's not good enough either. So the optimal thing is to get 8 hours of good quality sleep, or 7 to 9, just depending on you as an individual, what you need. Your mood will be affected dramatically. We have different types of sleep: non-rapid eye movement and rapid eye movement. And throughout our 90-minute cycle, these change. So when we first go to sleep, we have about 5 cycles per night. When we first go to sleep in the first 90-minute cycle, non-rapid eye movement sleep is prominent. Non-rapid eye movement sleep helps you to discard of memories that are no longer needed or not really important and keep the ones that are. Then when we move to REM sleep, so rapid eye movement, this is the state of sleep that when you are dreaming, our brain waves are really interesting in this state because they're erratic and all over the place, similarly to when we're awake. The only reason you know someone will be in REM sleep is if you saw them with their eyes closed and their body muscles relaxed. If you were just looking at a brain graph, it's so similar. I'll put a picture of it up here. REM sleep is responsible for our emotional stability. REM sleep actually strengthens neural connections within the brain. It also helps you to process through anything traumatic or emotional that happened to you throughout the day. If you go to bed at your usual time, but you're cutting your sleep short by getting up a few hours earlier, you're cutting out your REM sleep. When you cut out your REM sleep, you will not be a happy camper. You will find it harder to control your emotions because REM sleep is responsible for stabilizing your emotions. You will be easily irritable, so easy for you to get angry at someone or to snap at someone. If you're in a relationship, it'll be much more likely that you're going to have an argument with your partner.
Just to summarize the difference between non-rapid eye movement sleep and rapid eye movement sleep, non-rapid eye movement sleep is responsible for going through everything you've been through throughout the day and deciding what's worth keeping and what's not. Then REM sleep, so rapid eye movement sleep, it is responsible for strengthening those neural connections. If you miss out on non-rapid eye movement sleep, it's predominantly physical effect. If you miss out on rapid eye movement sleep, it's mostly psychological. The REM sleep is responsible for your emotional stability. Both are equally important, and it's really important to try and get both as much as possible. If, for example, you miss out on 2 hours of sleep, you're getting up 2 hours earlier, You might think you've missed out on 25% of your overall sleep. However, you'll actually miss out on 60 to 90% of REM sleep if you miss those 2 hours. So the consequences of that is way worse than 25%. So just to be mindful of that. There's 4 stages of non-rapid eye movement sleep. In stage 2 of non-rapid eye movement sleep, this is where fact-based information gets moved from the short-term memory site, the hippocampus, to the cortex. When you're sleep deprived, there's also this like pendulum swing between your emotions, which I've definitely experienced before, and it so explains why. Where like your there's an area in your brain, striatum, and it's bathed in dopamine, and it's the part of your brain that's associated with risk taking. You're more likely to take uncalculated risk because your prefrontal cortex isn't as active, which is the part of your brain responsible for rational thought and logical and rational thought isn't activated. Your mood can easily swing from one to the other, so you can become like ecstatically happy about something, and then the next minute you can be crying over something else. So this massive shift in mood swings is associated with sleep deprivation, and for sure I've experienced it. If you're experiencing mood swings, in particular, really, really ecstatic to really, really sad to crying, of course it can also be hormonal factors, but also take sleep deprivation into consideration.
The consequences of routinely getting less than 6 hours sleep is an increased risk of certain diseases such as cancer. It impacts the hippocampus area, which is responsible for memory and learning. So your hippocampus area, your hippocampus area is an area that's responsible primarily for learning and memory. When you don't get adequate sleep, this area of your brain doesn't work correctly. It's not lit up in the same ways if you get proper amount of sleep, which is why if you've ever been really tired and you're trying to get in information, it just doesn't go in. Lack of sleep or lack of a sufficient number of hours of sleep is linked to a lot of psychiatric disorders and also to Alzheimer's disease. In Alzheimer's disease patients, you see a lot of beta amyloid, which is a protein plaque that's built in the brain. And when you sleep washes this protein plaque away, implying that there's a link between lack of sleep and Alzheimer's. Cardiovascular disease, stroke, congestive heart failure, depression, anxiety, and suicidality are all repercussions of not getting sufficient sleep. Also, weight gain. Not getting enough sleep suppresses our food satisfaction and it increases our desire to eat more. There is no point having this great fitness plan, working out, and going to the gym if you're not sleeping well. I think number one is sleep in the triangle fitness of health, we'll say. So we'd have sleep, diet, and exercise, right? Diet and exercise, they're both equally important, I think. To be fair, I don't want to put one above the other. I haven't done research into both of them specifically, but like sleep, number one. Sleep is the foundation on which all of your other health is built. But without that solid foundation, it's like trying to build a house without the foundation, trying to build the walls without a solid ground to put it on. It's just not going to work. It's something that's so easily overlooked in a culture that's all like hustle, 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 work, work, work. I'll sleep when I'm dead. That maxim is so freaking stupid when you think of how important sleep is. If you want a short lifespan, then yeah, sleep when you're dead. You'll be dead pretty soon if you don't sleep. But these sayings in society that we've all heard of, that we all know of, having the perspective that sleep is lazy when someone sleeps in. Just on a side note, sleeping in itself is not bad, but it does mess with your circadian rhythm and your circadian clock. So sleeping in will make it more difficult for you to go to bed at your designated bedtime the following day. You don't want to have sleep anxiety. So sleep anxiety is when you have a constant worry that you didn't get enough sleep, that you did something like looked at light at a certain time when you shouldn't have, or you were on your phone later than you should have, and that's going to now keep you awake. Sleep anxiety can stop you from sleeping. No matter what happens, no matter whether you fell off the bandwagon and you were on your phone right before bed, it's okay, it's fine. It happens. Just don't do it again. Just learn from it, not to do it the next night. Something I wanted to say and it's gone out of my head. It's just important not to let sleep anxiety actually stop you from going to sleep.
If you wake up during the middle of the night, it's really best not to look at your phone to see what time it is, because if you know the time, it could cause more anxiety.
Being really stringent may not also be helpful or conducive to you falling asleep. So you got to be easy on yourself. So we get the optimal requirements of sleep by A, getting light exposure at the correct times in the morning. So for example, first thing in the morning, and at nighttime at sunset, if possible. Having the right sleep hygiene, creating an environment that's conducive to sleep. So having the good mattress and also good pillows, and making sure that the room is dark and that the temperature is low. So our bodies naturally decrease by like 2 degrees when you go to sleep.
When our melatonin spikes before bed, melatonin helps drop our temperature, and so it's good to have your room at a low temperature before bed and throughout your sleep. Stop the intake of caffeine 8 to 10 hours before sleep.
As I mentioned previously, exercising is also very important to do in order to have a good night's sleep.
So taking a nap can be a bit of a double-edged sword. You don't want to take a 90-minute nap. You don't want to wake up feeling groggy and more tired, or you don't want to wake up in the wrong part of a sleep cycle. If you're going into REM sleep in a nap, you're not getting enough sleep. That's a sign of that. But taking like a 20 or 30-minute nap is really good. It helps with memory and learning, and it helps you function more efficiently. However, if you take a nap, your levels of adenosine may decrease slightly. And as we know, adenosine, the more we have, when it comes to the end of the day, it's that thing that makes us feel tired. So if you take a nap and it lowers your adenosine, you may not feel tired at the end of the day. But as humans, we are actually biphasic, which means we are meant to sleep twice a day, in the sense that we are meant to have a nap. Typically in the afternoon slump period, it's fine to take a nap, but just as long as you don't feel groggy when you wake up from that nap, and just as long as you can still sleep at night after that nap. With those two things in mind, it can work for some people, maybe better than others.
I would try things first like yoga nidra, which is really beneficial for sleep. There's also meditations you can do or hypnosis you can do, which involve breathing and like exhale breaths. When you focus on your exhales and elongating your exhales, it brings you to the parasympathetic nervous system, which is a relaxed state of being. Andrew Huberman says magnesium is good to take before bed, but Matt Walker said there's not really that much scientific data to prove that. But if you take it and subjectively it works for you, then you should continue to take it. Theanine, 100 to 200 ml 30 to 60 minutes before bed helps. And also apigenin, which is a derivative of chamomile, is also very good to help you go to sleep. However, it does suppress the onset of estrogen, so just be aware of that. There are some repercussions. Always do your research. You could also go to a GP or a health practitioner to see what would work for you before you do make any decision. I'm just giving information that I have also learned myself. I would definitely try supplements as a last resort, and if you are not elderly, I would not take melatonin for the reasons I've mentioned. Also, you could try things like chamomile or lavender, and sometimes puka have like nighttime teas that are good to take and that really do help. Lavender also is meant to really help. You can get some lavender spray to spray on your pillow to help you sleep. I have to just give a shout out to people. When I started researching sleep, the first person that actually I came across was someone called Andrew Huberman, and he has amazing podcasts. I'm really grateful for him. I just want to give him a shout out to anyone who wants to research this further. And also Matt Walker. Matt Walker has written a book called Why We Sleep. She's like, no, bitch, let me down. Take my hood off. I said, take my hood off. Thank you so much for watching my video. And if you enjoyed it, please give it a like and a thumbs up. And if you want to put any comments in the comments, do. I appreciate it. And also check out the video that I made on learning how to learn. I will link it above here. And I hope you guys have a good day and an even better sleep. Goodbye.
So I've just put an Am I Sleeping Well checklist for you to go through. If you answer yes to a lot of these questions, you'll know yourself if you need to work on your sleep and sleeping better. I really hope you enjoyed the video, and please subscribe to my channel. Thank you. Bye now. Bye-bye.